Parts of the Indonesian capital are on lockdown after a night of violent protests. 6 people have been killed, hundreds injured. Protesters are angry at the results of last month's presidential election. This is the scene right now in Jakarta. On Tuesday, the Election Commission declared incumbent Joko Widodo the winner, giving him a second term in office. Indonesia's security minister says they will partially block social media to avoid spread of rumors. Overnight, demonstrators set buildings on fire and threw fireworks at police. Florence Louis has more from Jakarta.
The protests on Wednesday have been largely peaceful following clashes overnight. Now, it started with a couple of hundred protesters near the office of the election supervisory body. That crowd has slowly started to swell, but it's been largely peaceful. Protesters have not tried to breach the police barriers. You can see behind me a barricade made up of razor wire preventing access to this road. The protesters have mainly been chanting, down with Jokowi. They've been singing, they've been listening to speeches given by their leaders. Now, Prabowo, who ran against President Jokowi in the presidential election, has urged his supporters to come out to the streets in a show of people power. Now, these protests are expected to continue until at least Friday, which is when Prabowo's camp are expected to file a complaint with the Constitutional Court to dispute the election results. Now, Prabowo's camp alleges that there's been widespread cheating and irregularities during the poll, and hence these protests. It's worth noting, though, that 2 political parties that are part of Prabowo's coalition have actually come out to say that they accept the election outcome, and the leader of one of those parties has even congratulated President Joko Widodo on his victory. Now, some analysts have also pointed out that the fact that President Jokowi won by 11 percentage points, which roughly translates to 17 million votes, really in a way undermines the opposition's claim that there has been widespread electoral fraud. And most recently on Monday, the election supervisory body dismissed claims of systematic cheating, citing a lack of evidence.
Greg Feely is an Indonesian politics specialist at Australian National University. He joins us via Skype from Canberra. Thank you very much. Was there any indication that there would be this type of response to the election results?
Not some violence that would lead to the deaths of 6 people and quite extensive destruction of property and a great deal of disruption to life in what is the very centre of Jakarta, the largest city by far in Indonesia. Clearly, the government was fearful that this could turn violent, and that's why they've been taking a great range of measures. Amongst other things, they've mobilised some 35,000 personnel. And indeed, you'd have to say there were probably more security personnel than there were protesters. A lot of the violence that happened very late last night and early into this morning, in fact, seems to have been undertaken by just a fringe part of the main crowd that had turned out to protest the decision. But nonetheless, this is a protest that doesn't appear to have much public support at all, and certainly the great majority of the political players, the parties and leading political figures in Indonesia accept the Election Commission results. So this looks very much like people's lives have been taken in vain. So
you're saying that the big political players basically accept the results. So what can they do to tamp this down, to try to get a hold on this?
Well, already today, we've already had over the last week or so, senior Muslim leaders, for example. Most of the protesters have come from very strongly Islamist groups, sections of the community. And we've seen Muslim leaders from more moderate organisations appealing for calm, urging their supporters not to take to the streets. And I think most people have heeded that. This was a protest in the thousands, not in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, which we sometimes see on Jakarta streets. So it's relatively small, but it's been the most violent demonstration we've seen since late 2016.
So what does this say about where is this anger coming from? I realize you're saying it's from a majority, but where is that anger coming from? From a minority, pardon me.
Yes, so there's really several factors at work here. The first is the white-hot anger that the failed presidential candidate, Prabowo Subianto, feels about this election result. Most people think that he's being delusional about this. The evidence of wholesale fraud in the election is in actual fact completely inadequate. Most observers believe this was a free and fair election. Yes, there were some acts of maladministration, some mistakes made in counting and the like, but nothing that would be substantive enough to overturn the outcome of the election. He has systematically provoked the crowd. As your reporter said before, he's called for people power, he's called for people to take to the streets. He himself, however, did not choose to take to the streets yesterday. So other people have become the victims of his ramping up of this situation. So he's one part of it. The other part of it are these Islamist groups which tend to see the state as hostile to Islam. They detest President Jokowi, and they are often looking for opportunities that allow them to mobilise against him and against the government that he leads. And so those factors have come together in this particular tragic set of circumstances in the last 24 hours.
Greg Feely, we appreciate your expertise on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle.